my presentation is really to talk about how we can leverage those interconnections to improve not only what we offer here at our own institutions or in our own organizations, but how that actually can help to influence learners across, well, globally. So this is just a really brief snapshot of the many definitions of microcredentials that are proliferating in Ontario alone. And what I've done here is to represent the many different ways that people are trying to establish a corner of the microcredentials world and how confusing that actually becomes for earners of microcredentials and for the consumers of microcredentials, which are the business and industry partners who are really the two critical components or critical stakeholders in the engagement of microcredentials. And we spend a lot of time worrying about how to define a microcredential, and it really, I think, actually holds us back. What I try to speak about at Humber is that we want to be aligned standouts. What I mean by that is that we need to have enough alignment among ourselves as deliverers of microcredentials that there are some commonalities and some common factors that will advance the opportunities for earners of microcredentials. But at the same time, particularly as a post-secondary institution, we need to have the capability to stand out among our peers and to offer microcredentials as part of our extended offerings of our post-secondary credentials and training. And so there needs to be some capability for differentiation. And so there's a tension between that need for alignment and the need for distinction. And I think that this is where that opportunity that something like eCampus Ontario can present to us. So eCampus Ontario, as Dawn mentioned, has created a series of principles and frameworks that really can help to establish some of the basic common principles that we should adhere to, and give us some guidelines for how we can interconnect our microcredentials within the ecosystem. And what I like about the eCampus Ontario solution, it is Ontario-based, it is in Canada, but it is extensible, and I think has value that it shares across not only Canada, but also hopefully across some of your experiences as well outside of Canada. We have adopted a number of the principles and components of the framework at Humber, but what I like about it is that it gives us the flexibility in each individual context as we develop a microcredential at Humber to not pick and choose, but to emphasize in each example certain things to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the context. Always at Humber, we try to ensure that our microcredentials are relevant to the labor market. There's an importance around the verifiability and the brand that Humber can bring to a microcredential. We really value the ability of the learner to own their own learning and to curate their own learning in a way that is meaningful for them. And we see the extensibility of microcredentials and the ability to develop pathways to and beyond foundational training to be an essential component of a microcredential. And so we use these principles, I would say almost universally across all of the microcredentials that we deliver at Humber. We also, though, really focus on competency and skills, and our microcredentials are intended to be outcomes-based. They need to be granular and something specific that has translation between the learner and the consumer of those microcredentials. At the heart of a microcredential is an authentic assessment, and we're currently really exploring what that means. How can a learner demonstrate either at the end of a micro-learning opportunity or even using learning that they have gained from non-traditional sources, how can that assessment enable the identification with a microcredential? So that's really such a key component for us. And wherever possible, we're looking for opportunities for endorsements, for partnering, for the consumers of microcredentials to lend their value and therefore increase the benefit to the earners. And so it's really, truly a partnership. So there are other elements of the eCampus Ontario framework that appear in some of our microcredentials, and we feel the ability to be flexible within this kind of an approach. But the approach enables us to actually be very aligned, not only in our own context, but with other contexts across, across the landscape, across the ecosystem. Can you go to the next slide, Don? So this slide is about how we actually go about doing that alignment. How do we maintain alignment? We have developed templates that enable us to remain aligned to our foundations. We have 4 key pieces that we ensure that we bake into all of our micro-credentials. First, there's a really clear identification of stakeholders, and the stakeholders are the earners and the consumers and the potential endorsers of micro-credentials. If someone who has an idea for a micro-credential can very readily name who those 3 constituents are, then we know that we have a good idea of how to create a micro-credential. There is a detailed assessment and learning methodology that needs to be included, and we've used our tool to help to frame what that assessment and learning methodology should look like. There are quality measures that are a very important component, and in every micro-credential, we have an outcome and evaluation process so that we're consistently reviewing and ensuring that we're continuously improving our micro-credentials. And all of this aligns to our internal quality framework that is the backbone of our academic division, but it is flexible enough that it enables us to address the meaningful and timely needs of businesses and stakeholder partners who have immediacy and training priorities that are not directly tied to some of our full-time credentialed programs. We have one project that I'll just very briefly speak about, which kind of summarizes all of our application of that template. And this is a project that we call the Digital Fluency for the Workforce Project. It's actually a project that was funded by the Future Skills Center in Canada. And it's targeted at underrepresented individuals and employers who need to develop digital fluency in order to be able to achieve employment and to improve employment within their workforce environment. And we have applied the template that we've used to ensure that we've developed this series as a stackable series of digital micro-credentials. We began by having a consultation with partners from across every sector that Humber has an academic division connection with to identify what their digital fluency needs were. And so by doing so, we really centered that sense of the partnership and the relationship between the earner and the consumer. And we have developed an assessment methodology and a learning methodology that is really designed to target the learning for individuals, to enable learners to progress at a pace that meets their personalized needs. So in other words, if I have had a training, then I don't need to repeat training, but I can be assessed and awarded a micro-credential to progress to the next level. And there are measurement capabilities within that framework that enables us to demonstrate that there is a change in the workforce that has been brought about as a result of this micro-credential. And we're into nearly the second cohort of learners who are going to participate in this project. And we're seeing in real time the effect of this templated strategy, alignment to the principles that we have striven for both at Humber and provincially. And we're seeing those bearing out with really positive results for our earners and our learners.